So, have you ever looked at a mysterious ancient text and just felt like you were staring at a locked safe and you totally didn't have the combination? Well, you're not alone. For centuries, esoteric traditions used blinds, enigmas, and wild symbolism to hide some really profound truths. Today in this explainer, we're going on a seriously fascinating journey to crack that code. We are getting into the full details on everything from our physical biology all the way up to the vast spiritual cosmos. It's this incredible exploration of the hidden connections that shape our entire reality. And honestly, I promise you, by the end of this, you're probably going to look at your own body in a completely different way. All right, to really understand this blueprint, we have to completely redefine a word you've probably heard 1,000 times: alchemy. Now, if you check the Standard Webster's dictionary, it'll tell you it's a medieval science all about turning base metals into literal gold, or maybe finding a universal cure for disease. But according to the ancient texts we're looking at today, that is a massive exoteric distortion. True Hermetic science isn't about, boiling lead in a crucible and hoping you get rich. No, it's actually about the transmutation of the human body and consciousness itself. The ancient sages were writing about you, your mind, your flesh, not about making physical gold. Okay, let's dive into this comparison a bit deeper. Lab alchemy versus spiritual alchemy. Now, to be fair, our sources don't totally dismiss the lab work. Watching chemical changes like extraction and distillation in plants and minerals, that can actually serve as a series of incredibly potent meditations for the practitioner. But, and this is a big but, the texts make it incredibly clear. Making a plant stone in a beaker, that doesn't give you special powers. The true first matter of alchemy is actually the alchemists themselves. The real great work is transmuting the subject's own body and consciousness into that legendary philosopher's stone. And the absolute foundational rule of this entire process is perfectly summed up by this super famous maxim from the ancient Emerald Tablet. It goes like this: that which is below is as that which is above, and that which is above is as that which is below, for the performance of the miracles of the one thing. That right there is the core Hermetic axiom. It totally establishes the philosophical foundation for what we can basically call the macrocosm-microcosm zoom. Simply put, whatever happens out there in the massive vastness of the universe is mirrored exactly in the microscopic workings of you, the human being. And this actually builds into a literal numerical framework. In spiritual astrology, the macrocosm and microcosm aren't just, vague poetic concepts. They share a very precise mathematical relationship that links the physical right to the spiritual. According to these traditions, a visible material globe actually emerges out of an invisible spiritual globe in space. The text describes this physical phenomenon as separating from a total numerical value of 400. Then, 1/10 of this, which gives us the number 40, or a specific numerical point, separates to create the physical globe we actually see. So what does this all mean? It means the visible physical globe is really just 1/4 of the invisible essence in the space around it. The physical world is literally just the tip of the cosmic iceberg. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how that cosmic math applies to us directly. These massive cosmic principles map straight onto our human biology and our spiritual essence. So you have 3 governing principles in creation: solar, lunar, and material. Notice how they precipitate down. On a huge cosmic scale, they are the sun, the moon, and the earth. Then, in your individual astrological horoscope, they reflect as your personal sun, moon, and ascendant. But the real magic, that happens in the final translation. In the individual human, these exact same forces manifest as your spirit, your soul, and your physical body. Your physical form is quite literally woven from the threads of planetary principles. How wild is that? So how did the ancients actually use all this? Well, they used a practice known as Nyasa Vidya. This is a sacred meditation that focuses entirely on the exact correspondences between the zodiac signs up in the sky and the specific parts and potencies of the human body. By meditating on these cosmic connections, it acts as a sacrament. It literally bridges the physical body to these spiritual, cosmic forces, raising the human form up to the level of the divine. When a practitioner does this, they realize they aren't just the owner of their body, they are a steward of cosmic property. The stars themselves actually become helpers, stimulating the very cells of your body to cooperate in the great work. I want you to take a second and just look at your own hands, your arms, your torso. Really look at them. Because according to this blueprint, what you're really looking at is a map of occult anatomy, representing the human frame as the mythical Temple of Solomon. Ancient mystics viewed the human form as the ultimate microcosm, made in the exact structural image of the great cosmos. Every single pillar, every archway, every sacred room in that mythological temple corresponds directly to an organ, a bone, or a nervous system pathway inside of you right now. And this brings us to a rather shocking claim made by our sources. To those who were actually initiated into this science, the Old Testament wasn't simply a historical document. Actually, they viewed it as a hidden physiological and anatomical textbook. The ancient writers personified human biological functions, mental attributes, and spiritual qualities, and they basically dressed them up as gods, demons, and the sacred cities of the Holy Lands. So the geography of those scriptures is literally mapped out onto the human nervous system and organs. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer density of how deeply this mapping goes. We see intricate diagrams mapping Hebrew letters, Eastern chakras, and Western zodiac signs directly onto the physical anatomy. Notice how the spine is depicted as the central temple column. Every single vertebra, every nerve ganglion is accounted for. The heart is a temple chamber standing right upon the mountain of the diaphragm. The synthesis here is just stunning. It draws from all these diverse traditions to show that whether you're talking about Kabbalah, astrology, or yoga, they're all describing the exact same internal biological laboratory. To show you just how incredibly specific this gets, let's look at a single organ, the spleen. Occult anatomy views the spleen as way more than just a part of the immune system. It describes it as an umbrella-shaped body that literally collects the sun's rays. It's said to be in charge of the etheric body, which is coiled right there within the spleen, and it's this energetic process that's responsible for injecting white blood corpuscles into your circulatory system. So they completely fuse the physical biological function of the blood with invisible, radiant, solar energy. And this biological mapping, it extends to psychic phenomena as well. The texts argue that mediumship and clairvoyance are not the same thing at all, not even close. Mediumship is described as negative, basically the midnight of the seance room. Clairvoyance, on the other hand, is positive, the noonday of the temple. But here is the biological kicker. The source claims that the difference between these two states is literally about half the length of your physical spinal column. Where the energy is centered in your physical nervous system completely dictates the spiritual reality you experience. Now, as we explore these texts, we inevitably run into some bizarre, rapid-fire physical applications of magical forces. Take the angelical virtue, for example. Old magical texts claim that by accessing these angelic forces, a practitioner could just touch a woman's pulse to divine if an unborn child was male or female, mentally say an oration to test the virginity of an individual, or even reveal if a diseased person far away would live or die. Now, while this obviously sounds completely wild to our modern ears, it perfectly illustrates how seamlessly the ancients blurred the lines between invisible spiritual realms and the everyday physical realities of medicine and life. Moving past the historical oddities, we arrive at the core practical mechanism of this alchemy. How does the spiritual actually change the physical? Well, it's all through mental imagery. The texts explain that our physical vehicle is made of radiant energy, taking form as subtle electromagnetic fluids in our nerves. Our self-conscious mental states actively shape and modify these currents. So, when you change your mental imagery, you alter the currents running through your nervous system, which in turn literally changes the chemical functions of your blood and lymph. Just by changing the images in your mind, you are directly changing the physical chemistry of your body. Which leads us to a massive driving question. If the universe is this vast macrocosm, and our literal physical anatomy is the microcosm, how do we actually achieve this great work? How do we synthesize all this ancient wisdom into practical spiritual liberation? Well, the answer might surprise anyone who thinks spirituality requires completely abandoning the physical world. As Swami Vivekananda wrote, quote, "The body was the only instrument by which to attain to all these." So the absolutely crucial point is this. Do not reject your physical form. To reach ideality, knowledge, and spiritual liberation, your physical body is the essential, mandatory laboratory. If you break the body before the work is done, you simply have to start over. The physical flesh is the very crucible where the alchemical gold of consciousness is actually forged. We have journeyed from the cryptic language of medieval alchemists to the spinal columns of mystics and right down to the solar energy pumping in our blood. And it all leaves us with one final thought. Knowing that your anatomy isn't just flesh and bone, but a living, breathing map of the entire cosmos, a temple where mental imagery literally dictates physical reality, will you ever look at your physical vessel the same way again? Thank you so much for exploring this blueprint with me. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I will see you in the next explainer.